Reclaim is a podcast for women, by women, on conversations that matter, with your host, Thais Sky. Together, we will explore the questions of what does it look like to reclaim our sovereignty, our worthiness, our voices as women in this messy world. No topics are barred as we offer roundtable discussions on life, spirituality, politics, and what it means to be a woman in the modern age. Let's do this. Hello humans, Thais Sky here. Welcome to this week's episode of Reclaim. Today I am joined by the one and only Alta, and we are going to be diving into the conversation of what does it look like to reclaim spiritual entrepreneurship. This topic is very near and dear to my heart because I am a spiritual entrepreneur. I've been a spiritual entrepreneur for 6 years now, and the industry has changed a lot since I first started back in 2011. And let me tell you, at the beginning, I did a lot of things that I don't know if I would do now because I was told that you had to do them in order to be successful. I did what everyone else told me to. In fact, at one point, I had subscribed to over 300 newsletters from people all across the industry telling me how to be an entrepreneur. And I would pour through those emails every single day, hoping that the next free ebook, that the next thing was going to tell me how to brand myself in a way that would instantly bring a 6-figure income into my life. And so then, I bought into this idea that if you just manifest it correctly, if you just positive think your way, then, you gotta get out of your own way and you will make a lot of money. And money never came. And I've had to really unpack a lot of the beliefs that I was taught to get to the center of what is true for me, what is real for me, and are these beliefs that are in the industry, are they really what it's going to take in order for us to be successful as spiritual entrepreneurs? So these are some questions that I want you to be sitting with as you hear me and Lauren talk about this. What does it mean to you to be a spiritual entrepreneur? What does your responsibility lie as a spiritual entrepreneur? And lastly, when you expand your life beyond just the next few years, when you look at your life from the standpoint of 50 years from now, what is it that you really want to be known for? So let me introduce you to Alta. Lauren is a soul guide. She's a shadow diver and spiritual teacher known for burning down the stale, fluffy, boring self-help formulas and helping women ignite true spiritual liberation. She believes that loss, grief, and pain are healing initiations, and if honored, they will fortify you, bringing you through the shadows into the light of your soul. Lauren leads the Shadow Dive Retreat, a sacred 3-day gathering where she uses movement, meditation, ritual, art, and ancient spiritual practices to help women dive deep into their healing by surrendering facades, shedding fears, and finally coming home to themselves. The essence of her work is distilled to freedom, supporting you in finding it, cultivating it, living it. Because your power is in this moment, in this breath, in this one courageous, against all odds, courageously true. Yes. Yes. I adore Lauren, and I know you are going to love the insights that she shares in this interview. So let's get into it. Lauren, I am so excited to be here with you today. Welcome to Reclaim.
Thank you. One of my favorite words. I am so happy and honored and excited to be here with you.
This word is so good. There's so many words that I'm driving on right now. Belonging is one of them. Mm-hmm. And the idea of reclamation and declaration. I'm just obsessed. I'm obsessed.
Words are so good. They get right to the heart.
Yeah, they really do. So I want to start us off talking about something that we spoke about in a private conversation that we had. Was it last week or the week before? Mm-hmm. We hopped on the phone and we started talking about spiritual entrepreneurship and navigating how to be conscientious of each other while, being spiritual teachers, healers, coaches, guides, without dogma and without using these very dogmatic universal statements as a form of manipulation. So I'd love to start there, and then we'll see where the conversation unfolds.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's complex. I think
Yeah.
it's multi-layered. I think it's multifaceted because in a sense, dogma is useful.
Yes.
It gives us all framework for spiritual growth and lessons and teachers and prophets and, all kinds of things that we have learned through either religion or spirituality or teachers or different lineages all have dogma.
Yeah.
So I think that they can be useful, but I think it can also be really limiting if it gets framed as the right way to be quote unquote spiritual or the wrong way to be spiritual, as if there is only one way. I think that's where it starts to get dangerous when we actually disconnect, because my whole philosophy as a spiritual person, as a teacher, as a devotee of God and the sacred is that relationship. I'm not interested really in a lot of humans' interpretations of it or the way that I should be spiritual, what a priestess or a healer or a whatever, fill in the trendy word of the moment, looks like or seems like or sounds like, right? So I'm really, really interested in getting underneath all of that dogma and connecting with the divine. So that's my ultimate objective.
And I know that you do a lot of shadow work, and that's something that I see in your work. It's so beautiful how how you take people into that depth. And I would love to hear your thoughts on what is the shadow side of spirituality and being a spiritual entrepreneur.
I think the shadow side, really, of anything, including spirituality and being spiritual entrepreneur, is reclaiming, those parts of ourselves that we've disowned, that we've forgotten, that we've tried to get rid of, that we don't think are pretty or beautiful or perfect or wonderful or whole or sacred enough to be considered worthy of us. So whether that's our anger or those parts of ourselves that we are embarrassed by or whatever it is, because for everyone it's different. When we disown that, that's the shadow, because we have to really be powerful, to really be whole, we have to reclaim all of those parts of ourselves. And I think what happens when we get into this kind of spiritual entrepreneurship, quote unquote, spiritual entrepreneurship work, is that people only want to focus on love and light. People only want to focus on the things that feel good or look good or sound good or whatever their particular framework is, because it's different depending on what slice of that world you're in. And we don't want to reclaim, we don't want to own, we don't want to honor maybe those parts of us that aren't that developed, that are undernourished, that are maybe not as mature or pretty or polished as the other parts. And it can get dangerous because it's connected to commerce, right? It's connected to being able to pay our bills, being able to have a position in our field, so to speak. And it gets dangerous when you're talking about spirit and the sacred and the numinous, those things that are kind of underneath the surface, and connecting them with your value and your economic engine.
Yeah, there's so many specific things that I want to get into. Two things popped into my mind that I want to address. First off is just the conversation of manifestation, because I see a lot of our shadows coming through in the conversation of manifestation, because what happens is, at least this is what happened for me personally, is I found unconsciously manifestation to be a way that I can offer certainty for myself. Right. It's almost like, okay, I can't exist in Harry Potter world, okay, I don't have a wand, right? I don't have a way to make things come out of nothing, but manifestation feels like a channel in which if I really control my thoughts and really make sure that I'm vibing high and I'm, in that place of believing in myself that I can make $1 billion tomorrow, if I'm operating in that place, then it's a certainty that I will get it, because like attracts like, and I will bring it into my life. And if I'm not bringing it in, Laren, it's not because of systemic oppression. It's not because of anything else. It's because I don't believe enough in myself. I am blocking my own manifestation. And that feels like so much skewed bullshit.
It is.
that that we're pushing onto people. So let's dismantle there. Let's start there, because I see it so much in the entrepreneurial space. And I was so in there, and I perpetuated that, and I believed that. And now looking back, I have so much sympathy and compassion for myself, because I did it all out of a desire to have an inkling of control in my life.
Yeah. Ooh, so many juicy pieces of that dynamic, right? So on one hand, I think for me, the approach that I have to life is that we don't have control, right?
Yeah.
Like we are not in charge. This is why when I wrote something maybe last year where I said, talking about God or the sacred or a higher power in this spiritual online space can feel blasphemous. Like deferring to or referring to something bigger than yourself can feel blasphemous in a space that is reliant on quote unquote manifestation, that you have the power to make or break your life. And that's not my philosophy or perspective. I think we do have personal agency. We do have power, and we're connected to the whole. We're connected to the divine. All of that is true. And we're not in charge. We do not have the final say. And I think to give ourselves that much responsibility is very dangerous, can be psychologically very damaging, and it's irresponsible. And that's the part where it gets complicated, when it's like, if these sales techniques that are taught, right? Like if you don't manifest this, you don't want it bad enough, you don't deserve it, you're not worthy of this, or you don't think you're worthy, or you're whatever the narrative is, which is dangerous, because again, it may not be the right time. It may not be the right offering. You may not just be the right teacher, or there may be some other structural things that you need to do to shift it. I'm in the process right now where I'm reevaluating my work and saying, how can I really communicate what I do even better to my people? Which isn't necessarily about me being able to manifest it or not manifest it, but it's about getting alignment and being of service to the people I'm here to serve. So I think it has to get out of these kind of guilt triggers, these shame triggers, these blame triggers about someone being a wrong or right spiritual person, doing it good or bad, and really connect to the actual purpose of the work. Because truthfully, I think for a lot of people, of course not everyone, but a lot of people, the trendy spiritual entrepreneurship is just another trend. It's just another fad that's kind of coming and going. And it really has nothing to do with God or the sacred or the divine or devotion or love or anything. It's just another way to make money, disguised as that. So I think the tools of guilt tripping because you didn't manifest it are dangerous. Yeah. They're dangerous weapons, actually, that are damaging more than good.
Yeah, I was trained that, if you're on a sales conversation and people say, oh, I don't have that amount of money, I don't have $1,000, let's say, then they're getting in their own way of their own happiness, because they're not living in possibility, they're living in limitation. And so the answer to that, the response to that is, if you were in the hospital right now, right, and you were told that you need $1,000 to have arm surgery or whatever, to have some sort of surgery, you would find the money, right? To which case you would say, well, yeah, of course, if it's life or death, I would find the money. And then you say, so there you go. See, money is available to you. You're just not living enough in that sense of possibility to believe that money can. You have to get out of your way, Laren, and believe that, because once you believe that you have that money, the money is going to be making its way towards you right now. That's what I've been trained. That was what I was trained to say in sales conversations. And now I'm sitting here like, what does that even mean? That we're equating a course with life or death surgery, that you're basically saying, if you don't find a way to make this money, that means you don't want it enough, you don't care enough about yourself. It's just, there's so much manipulation there.
Yeah.
And what I see is that when we say things like that, we are stripping the other person of their sovereignty while we are trying to sell them their sovereignty.
That's exactly it. That's how capitalism works, right? Like that's the danger. That's the danger that, I mean, that's exactly how, and that's why I say that the spiritual entrepreneurship can be just a new trendy thing. Like if we look at the beauty industry, if we parallel it, the beauty industry is simultaneously stripping women of their self-esteem, telling them they're not beautiful, to sell them their self-esteem as beauty. You know, it's the same exact thing, you know, like it's the same thing. And it happens not only in the spiritual entrepreneurship space, it happens in religion, it happens in all kinds of, I mean, it's, I think part of what happens with capitalism, not exclusively, but capitalism and greed together. When you hinge it on fear, when you hinge it on someone's belief that they're not enough, that they're not going to ever be enough, that they can't ever do enough, but they can buy it, they can supplement it financially. That's when it gets dangerous, because ultimately my work is about healing, but I don't come from a place of thinking that we are broken. I believe in my heart of hearts, my soul of souls, that we are all born perfect, whole, and complete. And there's nothing that we can ever do to be incomplete. So people don't actually need, quote unquote, my work, because I can't fix anyone because they're not actually broken.
Yeah.
My work is just to help people come home to themselves, just to realign with their wholeness, because they may have forgotten it. They may have unlearned it. They may have stepped away from it through all of this conditioning through their lives. And so my job is only to help them realign with who they actually and already are.
Yeah.
That's what healing is to me.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like, you know, that's where the stickiness comes from, I think, is not in and of itself the spiritual entrepreneurship, but when it comes to earning and making money. Because I think that that's where we start to believe that we have to play certain games, we have to say certain things, we have to do certain things in order to make money. You know, we have to sell the lifestyle, we have to sell the transformation. You know, when I invested in my first high-end coach, you know, she came at the price point of $25,000 for the year. And at that time, I didn't have that type of income. I was not making anywhere near that amount of money, but, you know, I believed in what she was offering me. And so I put it on a credit card. And, you know, I remember when she asked me, okay, let's restructure your offerings. You know, what do you want to offer? I thought, well, if I can, you know, if I have to put a price tag on my offering, you know, if I have to put a dollar amount to what I'm offering, and what I'm offering is, you know, completely in value, like you can't quantify it, then what's $25,000, right? If what I'm offering you is transformation, then there's no price point on it, then of course I'm going to sell it at $25,000. But I think when we equate our worth and our value in our work with money and monetary symbols, then we detract from the actual value, inherent value of our work, if that makes any sense.
It totally does. I mean, it totally does. I charge a similar fee to work with me for 6 months.
Yeah.
And I do not take on clients for whom that would be a financial burden.
Yeah.
If it is going to be a financial impact, it's not even an offer that we talk about. It's not even an offer that's available, because I will not teach you how to make money. Yeah. And so most of my clients do end up making more money. They end up changing their financial, you know, all these things happen, but it's not a promise that I can make. And it would feel so out of integrity to me to charge, to create a financial burden, to create a financial hardship, and not be able to guarantee that kind of ROI.
Yeah.
Period. And I don't know many people who can guarantee that kind of ROI. So it just feels, like you said earlier, manipulative and dishonest, and really unfair to be kind of playing on people's hope that they will be able to turn that kind of money, because you said it's a spiritual thing. It's just not, it's not fair.
Yeah. Well, but when you're in alignment, land with the universe, then you'll make all the money you want to make. right? That's the promise. Again, it goes back to the sense of security. I'm
Yeah.
seeing it so clearly right now on how we use spiritual concepts just to affirm our need to feel safe and to belong. And we do it by manipulating these huge ass truths. Like, I
Hmm.
believe in the truth of cause and effect, hands down, is one of the principal laws of the world, just like the law of gravity. I truly believe that what happen, it's all cause and effect. I get that. But when we degrade such a massive truth to that meaning that if you believe in yourself, then you should obviously make $1 million, $1 billion, then what is that saying to people who aren't making that money?
Right. And I mean, I think it's a really distorted framework because, and this is why I started with saying, I don't think I'm in charge. There's no way for me to know out of all of the infinite things that are happening in the universe at the same time, infinite possibilities in this ever expanding universe, that my one human limited understanding is what makes sense. Like that I understand. I mean, I think some people, we all have hardship, right? We all have challenges. We all have goals that we want to achieve that just don't happen in the time that we think they should. We all are disappointed by things. That's life. And I think that's the human condition. And I think part of what we're sold in this kind of spiritual space is like, if you do the right things, if you say the right things, if you say this right mantra or say this right affirmation or drink this perfect green smoothie or stand on your head for 45 minutes or do this yoga pose, whatever, that you will then manifest the life that you're here to manifest. And I don't think that I have all the answers. My prayer is this or something greater for the good of all involved. That's my surrender, because who am I to know what the big picture is of my life, what my actual purpose is. And that's where it starts to get dangerous. I think we can know a fraction of it. We can be in prayer and meditation and devotion and openness and get downloads and insights and ahas. And if we follow our intuition and do what we're told, and even if it's unpopular, and do what we're told internally, even if it's unpopular, that we can live a more aligned life. Absolutely. And does that mean that will come without hardship? No. Does that mean it will come without disappointment? No. Does it mean it will come with $7 million? No, it doesn't mean any of that. Does it mean that you will learn how to be happy and more at peace with what you have? Probably. Right?
Yeah.
Like that's to me the ultimate goal of all the spiritual work, that even if my bank account never hits multiple six figures, even if I never achieve these kind of the New York Times bestseller, or Oprah calls me to have me on Super Soul Sunday, even if none of those things never happen, I will still feel aligned and alive and on purpose and useful and like I'm doing what I was born to do. And that is the bottom line to me, not these external kind of markers that don't actually matter at the end of the day.
Yeah, I hear that. And I feel like that has absolutely been my journey the past 2 years of dismantling so much of what I believed would make me feel comfortable and safe and whole, right, and in control, and realizing that I was just twisting these truths for my own gains. And when I started to dismantle and started to look at my privilege and starting to look at my role amongst things, I started to see that I'm actually more interested in softening and letting go and releasing so that I can lean into the mystery that is life.
Yes.
And into the space of, no matter what happens, I'm solid. I'm here. And I don't need anything outside of myself to dictate what I look like and what I need to look like in order for me to be happy.
That's exactly it. That's ultimately exactly it. And for me, it helps to contextualize the work, right? Like, not business, but if this work is ultimately about exactly what you just named, it's helpful for me to look at people who've done it before me. So I look at Nelson Mandela, who was in prison for decades and still learned how to have peace of mind with nothing. He didn't have a tarot card. He didn't have, a crystal. He didn't have a special mat. He didn't have, he didn't do a Facebook spread. was sitting in his prison cell for decades
Yeah.
as his country was changing, and
Yeah.
he was, how do you find peace there? So
Yeah.
my work is ultimately working with my clients, how do I help you do exactly what, find that peace, that still small place within yourself, regardless of what has changed or hasn't changed in the outside world, so that if you are in a room by yourself for the next 20 years, you know how to find peace.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my favorite stories of Mandela is that they had to keep changing the guards because the guards would fall in love with him.
Mm-hmm.
And the type of presence that is required for you as the oppressed, right, to extend that type of compassion for all beings, including the people who are literally keeping you in prison,
Yeah.
I think speaks a lot to his resolution that he was not going to let this kill him, break him, annihilate him, make him disappear.
Right. And he didn't sell a master class when he got out. He didn't sell a mastermind. He didn't sell anything. He just lived it and was strategic on how he was going to change it, because he still had to be strategic. He couldn't just sit on the rock and just say, okay, now I'm done. You all figure it out, right? Like, I'm manifesting this. So no, he worked hard. Yeah. He still worked hard. And I think it takes all that. So it's a combination. It requires us to be alive and alert and active and proactive on all of the levels we can in order to heal and or to create the world that we all want to live in.
Yeah. So something else that came up for me when you were talking at the very beginning, and I said 2, well, this is the 2, is this idea that I was called out on a couple months ago, and I love that I was called out on it. I wrote a post and I basically said, like, I feel called to share this with you. I feel called to share that this is going on. And someone lovingly, I got on a phone call with a friend, and she lovingly said, you have your own autonomy. Yes, you can feel called to do something, but then you get to take responsibility for that activity or that action in the world. And I feel like oftentimes we use the words I feel called to kind of manipulate the sense of it's coming from a higher power, and therefore it is an almighty truth, right? Like, Laren, I feel called to get on the phone with you and invite you into my program. Well, then you're all like, well, then who am I to say no? Because God is telling you through, to call me in. So it's a way that I feel like we use language and contort language to make it seem like we're connected with something so much bigger that has a vision for you and why you need to come into my program.
I mean, I think it does definitely play on those kind of manipulation phrasings that you were mentioning earlier, because it doesn't create that space for consent or for that other person's sovereignty. Exactly. Not to say that they can't assert it, right? But it's not a conversation where it's like, I feel called. What do you think? Right. Does this resonate with you too? Like, I could be off base here, but which is like all of these ins and outs for that give people permission and in a softer way to say, that doesn't feel good to me. I have a friend who I've known for my whole life. We grew up together. We ended up going to college together. We're on spiritual paths in very different ways. But she often says to me, my intuition said this to me about you. And I'm like, oh girl, no, that's for you. That's not for me. Like, she's always telling me what her intuition is saying for me. And it never resonated. It's never resonated. And I'm glad that she feels comfortable saying that, because that's, we're friends, and I'm glad that she feels comfortable, and I don't ever take it on because it doesn't resonate with me. The Buddha said, I'm paraphrasing here, but don't ever follow something just because I said it. Do it because it resonates with you. That's the whole point of the teachings of the Buddha is how do you connect with your own inner truth? And I think that can be when people are hungry and seeking and wanting a deeper answer, it can be very dangerous to say, oh, I got this from God, so I'm giving it to you, because it doesn't give people their own sovereignty, their own agency to make a decision for themselves.
Yeah, I saw a sales page that a woman who calls herself a medium psychic, I don't know anything about her except that we're connected on social media, and she had a sales page, and I was curious, so I clicked through it, and one of the one of the captions was, come co-create, with the universe and develop a deeper relationship with the universe with me in tow. And kind of basically selling that, like, for $5,000, you get deeper access to the universe with me and my work. And while that could be true, and I think when we work with people who are healers and teachers and guides like us and spiritual people, like, yes, we will help you connect with the deeper truths within you, whatever way that looks like for you. But when we use that as a selling point of, I have a deeper access to the universe, and because you're working with me, you'll get that access, it seems kind of manipulative. It just felt off to me. And I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be off. I don't want to, make a blanket statement that every single person who does that is off. But I think it's definitely using some of the same tools and techniques that are used in many, many religions of, like, I have the answer. You must come to this particular building and talk to this particular person and say these particular things in order to have access to God, which is not my philosophy at all. I'm much more rooted in being a guide and helping, because I know we all have our own answers. We all have our own truths. There are, how many, 6-7 billion people on the planet? There's no way that we all have the same answer. There's no way. We all have different contexts, cultural contexts. We all have different languages. We all have different histories and everyday lived experiences. We need different things. So I think it's very dangerous to say, you come and I will give you all the answers, or you can get it with me, when it's my approach is more, I will help you find your own answers that you already have. I'm not going to be putting them inside of you. I'm going to help you peel back the layers, heal what's blocking you from understanding and accepting your own truth so that you can live them, which does, I think, can require guidance if you don't know how to do it yourself.
Yeah, and I love that you connected it back to religion. And I feel like so much of what we share in spiritual circles is really just a reiteration in a different language, maybe, to the same dogmatic views that, we eschewed in religion.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really interesting how it all comes back around. Our ego comes with us no matter where we go.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the things that we've said is a no in religion, we find ourselves repeating in spiritual circles. And so let's talk about, like, so what can we do, Laren? How can we start to reclaim the goodness, the inherent brilliance and necessity of being spiritual entrepreneurs, so that it's not manipulative, so it's not icky, so that it feels grounded in truth and not misleading to people?
I mean, I think one thing is to really see if you are a spiritual entrepreneur.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like, to see, maybe you just want to have, like, spiritual conversations with people, or maybe you just want to have a spiritual book club, or maybe, maybe you just want to, like, go to spiritual workshops and retreats and have really great relationships with people that you meet there. Maybe you don't actually want to have a business based on it. Not you particularly, but because I think it's because it is kind of wrapped into this new trendy kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's not meant for everybody just because you can. And I think there is something about a calling on it, a calling, like, a lot of people are calling themselves priestesses or different practitioners, but they're also clergy. A priestess is a clergy member. Like, a priest is a clergy member. That's a duty and a responsibility. It's not just a trendy thing to call yourself because it sounds cool. If you are really a priestess and you do that kind of work, more power to you. But I think it's really about getting clear about your intentions, your education, your training, your preparation. How are you really ready to use that? Or maybe you're not a spiritual educator or teacher or guide, but you use spiritual tools to support your work. That's also valid and things. So I think part of it's, like, because there is some panache to it, there is some sizzle to being a spiritual entrepreneur, like, it's kind of sexy, it's exciting for the moment. But I think it's about being honest with yourself if that's actually what you're doing, and or why you're doing it.
Yeah, that is such a good place to start. And as you were speaking, I just immediately started thinking about church and
Mm-hmm.
how I feel like while church can be dogmatic and all of the things, one of the beautiful things about churches is the community aspect, where you walk into a church and
Yes.
you immediately feel that support system, and there are embedded support systems in churches to support those who have less, who are struggling, and we find ways to fundraise and to bring money, and there's tithing, and all those things are included in church. And I feel like spirituality is almost like we picked and chose certain things that we now repackaged as spirituality, but we miss the community component. And so it's become a highly individualized route.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's really perpetuating privilege. It's perpetuating this what am I trying to say? Like, this way of operating in the world where we don't need each other, and we're all, trying to outdo our mediumship and our psychic ship.
It's so true. And that's why it's so important to start with the intention. Like, what is your intention? Is it just to be a new fancy spiritual teacher? Is it just to have a New York Times bestseller? Is it just to be on Oprah's couch? Those are all valid, but call a thing a thing. Like, even if internally to yourself, you are owning that that's why you're doing it, that's fine. And not to say you can't do all of those things and do great work, but they require different things, right? Like, being commercially successful to the masses requires something very, very different than doing deep soul healing work. Yeah. They just require different things. Yeah. So you got to be honest with yourself. And it is about isolation, and it is about putting people on a pedestal, and it is about having this one kind of person that you turn to. I strongly believe that trauma does not happen in isolation, and neither does healing. Healing requires community. Yes. Healing requires vulnerability. Healing requires being out of control. Healing requires death. Healing requires letting go of what's not working. All of that. It's not cute. It's not polished. It's not pretty. It's not perfect. It's not, 3 quick tips. It's not, there's no hack involved. Yes. So like, when you really get down to the deeper truths of what healing is and what it requires, it may require isolation. It may require immersion, it may require a lot, and it's going to require something different for every single person. So, but it does require being held accountable. It does require truth.
Period. Pause. And full stop right there. It requires accountability.
Yeah.
Can we please dive into that real quick? Mm-hmm. Because I am finding that we are operating with so much fragility that we are afraid when someone tells us, listen, what you're doing is manipulative or is hurtful or whatever. What I find is that women, and I'm going to include myself in this, hello, I'm a white woman, I so get that type of fragility, but what happens is we get called out, we shut down, we shut that person out, and we basically say, right, Lauren, you're against women, because if you're for women, you would support me and not, call me out.
Yeah, which is BS.
Yes. And that, again, is what's missing with real church, real community. Yeah. If we think about, if we go back into real communities, and the environment was an environment of calling each other out, of being in community, using shame as a beautiful tool to see and reflect each other's goodness. But if we look at indigenous cultures, the way that they used community was to support your individuality within this construct, but we've removed that construct. And so now we're I feel like we're struggling. And so then of course we're going to culturally appropriate the word tribe and call everyone a tribe, our newsletter a tribe, our Facebook group a tribe, everything's a tribe, when none of that is actually
a tribe.
It's just a group that you sell to.
Right.
How is that a tribe? Please explain to me how that's a tribe, or how even that's a community. And yes, Yes.
Yeah. It is requiring these things. It is requiring risking unpopularity. It is requiring not fitting into this kind of prim and polished feminine, quote unquote, femininity mold. I think part of it is coming face to face with patriarchy, right? Like what patriarchy requires of women to be feminine. What that is, the expectation is that we're soft and sweet and sugar and spice and everything nice, when that's not actually who we are as whole people, right? That may be part of who we are, and it may not be. But if we can't hold each other accountable, if we can't call each other out or in, if we can't say what's actually true and what something is impacting without like hand-holding and coddling adult people, it's not effective, right? And
Yes.
I don't think that that's spiritual, makes it any more spiritual. I think it takes all kinds. I'm a very direct communicator.
Yeah, you're brilliant. You're fucking brilliant in your communication. Every time I see something that you write, I'm like, fuck yeah, Lan. You tell it. You say it.
Thank you. That's my voice, right? Like I've always been a direct communicator. I'm a direct communicator in my writing, in my speaking, in my personal relationships. It's who I am in the world. It's who I am. Whether people like it or not. And some people, I'm sure, don't like it because it challenges them. It confronts them to address parts of themselves that they're uncomfortable with, that they're not getting away with. I have something on my website that says 7 reasons I'm not right for you. And it's a filtering system for people who want to work with me, who want quote unquote healing, but don't want to do the work. And one of the things I say is that you think I'm going to do the work for you. I also say I'm a very direct communicator. And if you need words wrapped in cotton candy and sugar and spice, I'm probably not the best person for you. Yeah. Not that I'll be mean-spirited or cruel or anything of that sense, but I will speak from the truth that I hold, and I will require you to speak your own truth. And I say, even if you think you can quote unquote get away with it, I require the truth because I'm here for your ultimate healing and transformation, not just to play on the surface.
Yeah. So I'm curious your thoughts on why you think that it is so hard for us to accept accountability. In your point of view, based on your work with our shadow selves and our depths, do you find makes it hard for us to be reflected in an unpleasant way?
Well, that's a beautiful question because I think the answer is in the question. Okay. I think people have disassociated and disowned the parts of themselves that they're so uncomfortable with, that if you bring it up, if you challenge their perfect veneer, if you say, look, this is what's happened, you've impacted me, this is actually not accurate, or anything, it triggers this sense of, oh shit, this person is seeing that I'm not good, that I'm wrong, that I'm flawed, that I'm a sinner, that whatever their stuff is. So I have to protect my facade at all costs. And acknowledging that I've made a mistake, that I'm learning, that I'm growing, that I'm human, and not as an excuse or a justification, but as like really taking it in as real feedback, makes me seem less perfect, less good. So I think that's ultimately what it is. I don't think it's actually about fragility. I think it's about conditioning. Yeah, I don't buy the fragility piece at all. I think that people are way more robust than they give themselves credit for. Yeah. And that they just haven't learned to do it. And I think that people, depending on where they are in relationship to marginalization or oppression, or have had to deal with that and don't have the luxury of fragility. Yeah. But it's not that, some people are actually naturally more fragile than other people. It's just that they haven't had to be confronted with the realities, that they've been kind of protected more than others. think that
there's so many thoughts and facets to explore there. I think maybe part of that conditioning comes from the differences between kind of being in more collectivism and community-oriented structures versus individualism. I think when you can be kind of reflected, like if you grow up in a community where if one person says that your behavior is bad, but you are then reflected, in so many other people's eyes that you are good, you start to be able to differentiate your behavior from who you are. And I think we miss that when we're so individualized and we live in such small nuclear structures where we only see, examples of two people, maybe even one person, right, in single households, where if one person says that your behavior is bad, and it weakens, because we're so desperate for love as children, if our one structure falls apart in that moment, it can feel like death. Do you hear me? I feel like that may be a part of why white fragility or people who are, white are more conditioned to a sense of fragility, is because we've been built up with the structure of individualization. And to your token, we haven't been able to see how our whiteness is perpetuating violence. We have such a strong filter, and I don't know, I'm rambling here. I'm thinking out loud of how oh my God, my mind is exploding. It's literally exploding. I need to sit down, sit back, and really think about what you said, because there's so much goodness there in terms of that word conditioning.
Yeah. I mean, I think ultimately what you're describing boils down to privilege, right?
Yes.
Like, it's a privilege not to have to think about it. It's a
Yes.
privilege to move through the world and think that the world kind of revolves around you. It's
Yes.
a privilege to look, no matter where you look in media, to see a reflection of you.
Yes.
Right? Like, those are all privileges, which don't require you to confront how that impacts your psychological development or the entire world that has been developed to support it. So those are all privileges. And who wants to get rid of their privileges? Who wants to think that the things that they were given aren't innate, but they were actually, the whole social structure was constructed as kind of a hologram of it, but that it's not, that actually was unearned. I mean, there's so many layers, right? But that ultimately that's what it is. So when someone says, you know what, you really didn't earn this, and everyone doesn't have this is not universal, and maybe you don't even deserve it, it feels threatening, because it goes back to why don't I deserve all of the goodness?
Yes.
Well, you do, but you didn't actually earn many of the things that you've taken for granted for most of your life, and everybody else has to work hard for.
Well, and that conversation came up on my feed about cultural appropriation.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's so hard for some people to fathom why they can't take someone else's culture.
Right.
Because we've been so accustomed to believing that we can kind of take whatever we want. And as spiritual women, we get exposed. We live in such a beautiful culture where we get exposed to so many belief systems that we do get to pick and choose. And I think some of that is so beautiful. If I was not exposed to yoga and Buddhism and, a couple other theologies, I would not have had my transformation. So in some ways, I think that it's so beautiful that we get to have such a toolbox for our disposal. But I think it's to some people, it's crazy that they don't understand why they can't then sell other people's shit.
Right.
Because we've been so conditioned to think that we can just have whatever we want.
Totally. I mean, it's there, and this is workshops and classes and books and trainings and all kinds of things to unpack, because it is a lot. And it's like, it's not, but if we are going to create the world that we all want to live in, that is required.
Yes.
That a world that works for us all, that is required. It has to be unpacked. It has to be surrendered. It has to be transformed. Otherwise, it is just a continuation of exploitation, regardless of how good the intentions are. There are people who are losing severely because we do have this kind of spiritual buffet available to us.
Yes.
But people who are losing their temples, people who are losing their homes, people who are losing their sacred places because people are visiting there and leaving trails of trash and hiking up the property value. All kinds of stuff is happening
Mm-hmm.
in all kinds of different ways, because we think we should be able to do whatever we want to do as, Americans or whatever.
And I think as spiritual entrepreneurs, this is the joy that we get to carry, is to invite sensitivity into our awareness and consciousness. Like, we're already starting to open up to possibilities of our own awakening and our own healing. And now it's really imperative that we take it to the next step and not just say, this is something better for me, but what you said, Lan, at the beginning earlier, which is so beautiful, is this or something better for the good of all.
Mm-hmm.
And so we cannot be honoring the feminine, divine masculine, and we can't be honoring all these things if we're trampling and not even honoring people's lands that we are sitting on that is not inherently ours.
Mm-hmm. I think part of the kind of the privilege of privilege is not even knowing the impact that it has, right? Not even knowing all of the systems and people and structures at play to support the illusion. Not even knowing the sacrifices that people make in order to make sure that you're comfortable, in order to make sure that your fragility stays intact, like not having any idea. And I think about, I'm a Black woman. There are things that Black folk in America are raised to know as self-preservation, as life preservation, that white people will never know. You will just never know, because you never have to know it. But the ways that internalized oppression affects us historically and contemporarily is so impactful on our mental health, our physical health, our emotional, but it's been about and continues to be about survival. Like life, literally life and death, not like, reincarnation, metaphorical rebirth. No, like literally, how do you survive walking down the street? These are the codes that you have to know in order to stay alive. And not, so in order to get promoted at work, in order to be seen by your colleagues as a peer. There's so many things that people who are outside of the margin have to know in order to survive. And not knowing what those are is a privilege. Not even knowing those exist is a privilege.
I so hear that. I want to loop back around accountability. And let's just talk real quick. Like, okay, so you got called out for something, anything. You got called out for cultural appropriation. You got called out, because you were just unaware of something, anything that is actually offensive to some type of people. We all get called out all the time. The more, that we open ourselves up to this conversation of sovereignty of other people's culture and other people's way of life, we see that it's a very complex system, and now we're entering, the non-binary and all the sexual orientations and genders, and that's a whole new conversation for so many of us. So there's so much to unpack there. What are some things that we can start to do, Laren, to be held accountable and be open to feedback without it completely shutting us down to the conversation?
I mean, I think the most important thing is to take a class, to go to a training, to take a workshop, to humble yourself. I think a lot of people are trying to get kind of free workshops on Facebook. And that's not the best approach. So I think it is about researching, how can I be a better ally? How can I learn? And not like kind of pop culture BuzzFeed articles, because I just saw something on BuzzFeed like 5 reasons not to culture appropriate or something like that. But it's like, no, go hire someone whose job is to do this, who has said, this is my work in the world, who has training, who has and who's volunteering, not their time, who wants to get paid as an exchange of energy for teaching people about all of these things. Because there really are trainings and workshops and books and workshops and retreats and all kinds of things to take to learn these things. And I think it requires humility, and that's what's going to change things. So,
and I think the best part is when we do this work, we start to see what is real within us and what
Yes.
is socially constructed for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about you, but I have found that to be so powerful in my ability to then navigate the world with a fierceness of my sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have seen how much as a woman we are stripped of our value, and we are, told that we have to look a certain way and be a certain way. And the more that we can be held accountable, do the work, hire the people, get uncomfortable, the only thing
Right.
we're really peeling away is our illusion of separation and our ego.
Absolutely. 100%. That's exactly it.
And then
And
we actually get to see people and see humans.
mm-hmm.
And that is the most exciting thing, is to see another human.
Absolutely.
And yeah.
That's the whole point, right? Like that's the whole point of relationships, and not from a place of exploitation, not from a place of using someone, not from a place of like leveraging someone because they are whatever, but like really building deep connection and intimacy requires checking your privilege.
Yeah.
It requires owning where you've been damaging and hurtful, even if you don't want to, even if you had good intentions, even if fill in the blank, right? Like even ifs are not good enough reasons to not hold yourself accountable.
Yeah. Well, but I want to be ascended, man. I just want to ascend. I want to be an ascended master. Like, fuck being human.
Right.
I just want to talk to aliens and channel.
I mean, we all do, but like at what cost, right?
Yeah.
Like if people want to be ascended by stepping on whose neck?
Yeah.
And then saying, oh no, I'm not stepping on your neck. You made that up. All kinds of stuff. So that's why it's important to go to the trainings and read the books and talk to people who are professionals at teaching these things, because there is a lot to learn.
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts on reclaiming spiritual entrepreneurship?
Yeah, keep going. Keep going. Because there's a lot to reclaim, and it doesn't have to come at the cost or the expense of another culture. Like your own journey is worthwhile and valuable and enough.
Yeah. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Lauren, for your brilliance today.
Thank you. Thank you for opening this dynamic and beautiful and powerful conversation. I'm so glad.
Yes. Thank you. Lauren and I had a lot of thoughts about spirituality and spiritual entrepreneurship, and now we want to hear yours. Come hang out with us on Instagram and Facebook. You can find Lauren at Lauren Alta, that's LERINALTA, and me at I am Thais Sky. And if you'd like to learn more about Lauren's work, including her upcoming retreat, go to laurenalta.com. And as always, you can learn about me and my work at www.thaissky.com. See you next week.